All right.
Okay.
So
Boy, this looks good. I like this
yeah,
thing.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So Willis Morgan, thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk a little bit. Actually, you're going to be interjecting some thoughts into my Jeffrey Dahmer episode that I'm going to be doing here pretty soon. And you shared with me some information that I did not know about Jeffrey Dahmer and one of his potential victims from the past. And first off, I would like you to tell me a little bit about yourself, your background with this case and everything. Just introduce my listeners to you.
Okay. Well, as you said, my name's Willis Morgan. I'm originally from New York. I graduated from a small town at the end of Long Island, and I graduated from Belport High School. After high school, I went to Suffolk County Community College for a short time. And then after that, I joined the United States Air Force as a police officer.
Okay. Oh, nice. All right.
Right. While I was in the military, my parents had moved down to South Florida, Miami. And so when I was discharged from the Air Force, I had also come down to South Florida. That's how I ended up down here. And that was in 1972.
Okay.
And I took a job with the Miami Herald, the largest newspaper in Florida.
Yes,
and I was working there, right. And back then, when I started working, we were working a 4-day work week, which was 40 hours a week, but 10-hour shifts, 4 days a week. And my off days in 1981 were Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Okay, so Monday was my middle day off. And on July 27th, 1981, I decided to have lunch at the Hollywood Mall because there was a deli in there, which was called the Hollywood Mall Deli, but it was actually affectionately called, I should say, the German deli because it was primarily German. So I went there. I wanted to have a pastrami sandwich on rye with my German potatoes.
Yeah.
Not that I'm German.
Well, German potatoes are delicious.
They are, but I'm of Welsh descent.
Okay.
But anyway, so I went there to have lunch. And then while I was in the mall, I decided to stop off in Radio Shack first.
Yeah.
And I had an encounter in Radio Shack that was so bizarre that I never made it to the deli.
Oh,
because
wow.
This guy approached me and he was trying to start a conversation with me. I had no idea who he was. Of course,
and how old were you at this time? I don't want to do the math, but.
Right. No, at that time I was 34.
Okay.
In 1981. I'm going on 75 now.
Yep.
So I was 34. And this guy looked like about 20 years old. That was the age I gave when I went to the police.
Yep.
In my description, I told him 20. Years later, I would find out he was actually 21. So I was only off by 1 year.
Yeah,
so.
Good job.
Right. But anyway, he was disheveled, reeking of alcohol, and just very bizarre, bizarre, because he was trying to smile, but he had this dead dull look in his eyes. And he was trying to be friendly, but after I wouldn't respond to him, it became even more bizarre, so bizarre that when he finally stomped out of the Radio Shack to keep the encounter short, I knew somebody was going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
I actually knew it. I had that gut instinct in me because of the way he had approached me.
Right.
But I never thought a 6-year-old kid would be in trouble. My thinking at the time was that he was going to approach somebody maybe around my age, an adult, maybe, anywhere from 20 to 30, whatever, and there would be words exchanged, maybe a shoving match or a fight. My thinking was somebody might need help or maybe a witness or something. So I was watching him. And I actually watched him turn into Sears and go all the way to the back of Sears to the toy department. I saw him walk into the toy department.
Oh.
And I actually stood there from where I was. I stood there for a minute wondering what this guy was doing in the toy department.
Yeah.
But my thinking was, because, I know toy departments are where kids play on those video games. But, again, this was 1981.
Yep.
So my thinking then was that this guy who was about 20 was probably playing the video games himself.
Oh.
And I wasn't going to stand there all day. So I turned around and left. in fact, to show you how bizarre that encounter was, even after I left the mall, before I actually exited the mall, I turned around and looked to make sure this guy didn't follow me back, because I didn't want to have an encounter out in the parking
Yeah.
lot.
He made that much of an impression on you that you
He
knew
did.
like
He
that
did.
he was dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I went home. It was that very same evening. I was in the kitchen. I had the TV on to one of the local news stations. I don't remember which station it was now, but it was one of the local news stations. And I was making a sandwich in the kitchen, and I hear on the TV in the living room something about a missing child.
Mm.
And then I'm hearing Hollywood Bowl, and I'm thinking, Hollywood Bowl, that's where I was this afternoon.
Yep.
And then I hear them mention Sears, and then the toy department, and then the time of the day. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that guy did it.
Yeah.
It had to be that guy. I knew it had to be that guy. I mean, I didn't follow him all the way to the toy department for nothing.
Right.
But I just didn't know who this guy was. He never told me his name. So I would never know who he was until 10 years later.
Yes.
But in the meantime, the Hollywood police chief were going after the Walsh's house guest, James Campbell. In spite of the fact that witnesses were coming forward, they made a composite that looked nothing like James Campbell. They saw a kid being tossed into a blue van, multiple witnesses. One witness even gave them a partial tag number, but they were discounting everybody. They were so zeroed in on James Campbell. In fact, they were so zeroed in that some of these other attempted abductions, like the one in South Beach, Plantation, Deerfield Beach, and then there was one in Riviera Beach as well.
Yep.
The one in Riviera Beach was 2 weeks before Adam.
Okay.
Exactly 2 weeks. It was on a Monday, July 13th. Keep in mind, Adam was July 27th on a Monday.
Wow.
Okay, this was in a Twin City mall, another mall. With another Sears. This abduction happened where? The toy department. At the same time of day by a white male with a blue van. They made composites.
Same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when Adam was abducted, the police chief from Riviera Beach, which is just north of West Palm Beach, called the Hollywood Police Department and told them, hey, we think our case is related. Everything is matching.
Yeah.
Including the composites.
It had to be.
Hollywood even sent 2 detectives up to West Palm Beach to investigate. But in their investigation, they dismissed the police chief. They dismissed all the witnesses and the composites. Even though they matched the composites from the Hollywood Mall, they dismissed them. You know why? They didn't look like James Campbell.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a blue van. So they dismissed them, even though it matched the Hollywood Mall. In fact, what they did, the witness from the Hollywood Mall, his name is Timothy Pottenberg, that made the original Bolo to be on the lookout for the blue van and the composite, because it was they had that on the dashboard of every police car, had that composite with the description of the vehicle.
Yeah.
And they accused Timothy of seeing 2 weeks earlier the Twin City Mall incident on TV and making his composite look like that one to match that. And so that's why they discounted it.
Yeah.
Instead of discounting James Campbell,
right,
they're discounting witnesses from multiple locations of attempted abductions.
Right.
Adam may have been the only successful abduction because the kid in the Twin City Mall was 10 years old, and most of these other locations were like 10 years old.
Okay.
10, 11 years old.
Adam was
so
6.
They all got away except for Adam. Adam was unable to get away.
Yes. So, okay. So
anyway,
you were, you.
I just wanted to say why they went after James Campbell. Because they had a good reason to go after him. But the thing is, you don't get so zeroed in that when you have composites coming in that don't match in descriptions from multiple locations, you don't dismiss everything, 5 locations, and then keep one guy because you think he's your suspect. And the reason they did that was because James Campbell, during his interrogation, admitted that he was having an affair with John Walsh's wife, Reve, for a couple of years. I've heard 2 years, I've heard 3 years, but whatever. He was having an affair with her. Yeah. And he admitted he proposed marriage to her. But she turned him down because she had a son with John. Right. And Adam. So the police were thinking, get rid of the kid, you get the wife. Because that scenario is played out many times.
All the time. Yes. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's what they were thinking. And they were so zeroed in on him with blinders. They couldn't get past that.
But eventually they did get past that. And then
Mhm.
they ended up looking at Otis Toole, serial killer
Right.
Otis Toole, as the
That was 2 years later.
A few years later. Yep.
Right.
So how did that happen? How did they zero in then from their first suspect over to Otis Toole? How did that transpire?
Right. Well, what happened was they only gave up on James Campbell because of John Walsh. He hired an attorney for James. His name was John Varon, and he was known as the Silver Fox because he was one of the great defense attorneys in Broward County down here. And he wrote a letter to the Hollywood Police Department saying that they are no longer to even speak to James without his permission and without him being there.
Okay.
And it was because of that letter that they stopped.
So John Walsh thought James was innocent.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
not only that, but he passed 3 polygraph exams and they still wouldn't let him go.
Okay.
The lead detective, they got into an argument with the detective that gave him the polygraph. What happened was this detective, his name is Joe Matthews. He's the one that ended up getting the case closed, by the way, and he's the author of Bringing Adam Home.
Okay.
But he was a detective for the Miami Beach Police Department. We'll get on to Otis Toole, but let me just finish.
Yeah.
This.
Oh, yeah.
But he was a detective for the Miami Beach Department, and he also owned a company, his own company, on the side called the Southern Institute of Polygraph. So,
okay.
Right. So the Hollywood Police Department hired his company to do the polygraphs of the Walshes and James Campbell, and he passed James Campbell 3 times and exonerated the Walshes. So before we get to Otis Toole, I want to just mention a little bit how Joe Matthews got involved in the case.
Yep.
So he exonerated the Walshes and James Campbell. And years later, in 1987, Fox Cable, or Fox TV, came up with this TV show that actually originated in Germany and England. Then it came to the United States. And when it came to the United States, they named it America's Most Wanted.
Yes.
Right.
And that's how most of us know who John Walsh is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But John Walsh wasn't their first pick. They had like 3 different choices, but in the end, they ended up settling on John Walsh as the host because of his son being murdered.
Yes.
And they thought he would make a great host for that show. So Detective Joe Matthews heard about John being the host of this show. So he called John and befriended him. And John Walsh, even though he wrote his book, Tears of Rage, the rage being the incompetence of the investigation by the Hollywood Police Department and these detectives. He wrote his book, and in his book, he called these detectives a bunch of bumbling, stumbling idiots since the Keystone Cops. That's John Walsh's quote.
Yeah.
But now that Detective Joe Matthews is befriending him, John Walsh ends up hiring this detective. This is what a lot of people don't realize, as he was hired as the senior lead investigator on America's Most Wanted.
Okay.
So now John Walsh had one of these quote unquote bumbling, stumbling idiot detectives right in his midst, feeding him false information for years, 12 years. That's how long he was on that show as a senior lead investigator for 12 years. And he's the one that propagated that fake theory about Otis Toole.
Okay. That's where it comes in. Okay.
That's where this detective.
Yeah.
So, but Matthews just didn't come up with that name Otis Toole out of the blue.
Right.
Several years later, Otis Toole injected himself into the case. Okay. But they went up there to interview him. And everything he said, he couldn't get anything right. So, it took him about 4 months to end up dismissing him as a viable suspect. But in the meantime, other police departments were also having him as a suspect because he was claiming to hundreds of murders all over the United States.
Yeah, he did. He claimed that he was a part of many murders as a serial killer, and he was a liar. He didn't.
He was a serial confessor.
Yes.
Right. So police departments across the United States started dismissing him because his timelines were clashing. He committed a murder the same day in New Jersey, the same day he committed one in California.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
so they were all
Yeah.
having to dismiss him. Some of them even closed cases, had to reopen them.
Wow.
This is how incompetent cops can be sometimes when they have such a great desire to close cases. You
Very
know?
true. Yes.
But anyway, so artists to inject him into the case, and they ended up dismissing him after a couple months, 4 months, I think it was about.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in 2000, I think it was 2007, Reve Walsh told John that she wanted to have the case closed. So she wanted to get a detective that could investigate the case and have it closed. So they called Joe Matthews. They remembered him. And so they asked him if he could do it. And he did what the Walshes wanted. He closed the case.
Okay.
But he closed it on an innocent man just to have it closed. That's not right. So
right.
In 2008, the police chief closed the case.
Blaming it on Otis Toole.
Blaming it on Otis Toole. Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
And when he closed that case, you know, Matthews, after he closed the case, wrote his book based on his manuscript that he gave to the police chief.
Okay.
He gave this, I think it was like a 400-page manuscript that he named after himself, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called the Matthews Report. Now, Matthews claimed he wanted that report to be used as an instruction manual for police departments across the United States on how to solve cold cases.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yet when I filed a lawsuit against him, all of a sudden you can't find that manuscript anywhere.
Oh, wow.
Except for his book, which is based on that manuscript. That's as close as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
In that book, you will not hear the name of not any of the witnesses. Yet Matthews claims he's called every single living witness. And my name nor any other witness's name is not in his book.
Okay.
The only witnesses he has are Otis Toole's cellmates who claim, yeah, everybody in prison knows he did it, which is not evidence.
Right. So you were an actual witness in the police. You filed you wrote a statement and all of that. And
I didn't write a statement.
Yeah.
Right.
You gave.
But I did go to the police in 1981. Okay. But they completely dismissed me. You know,
did they?
Okay. Kicked me out. I felt like a jerk for even wasting my time going.
Oh,
and they were very. Yeah. The police officer I talked to was very nasty, very condescending. You know, and he asked me if I had a receipt to prove I was there. Like, you know, he made me feel like I was just there for attention and making this up.
Yeah.
And then he asked me if I got the tag number of the vehicle, and I tried to explain to him about the Radio Shack. And I never went outside. This was in Radio Shack, this encounter, and I saw him walk into the toy department. And then he dismissed me with, yeah, okay, if we need you, we'll call you.
Yeah.
And I left.
And they never did call you.
They never called me. But days later, that's when those composites started coming out. And I knew when I saw the composite from Timothy Pottenberg's composite from the Hollywood Mall, I knew that whoever made that composite, because I didn't know Timothy at the time, whoever made the composite saw the same guy I saw, because I didn't think I could make it any better. You know, it's about as close as you're going to get at considering what a composite is.
Yes.
You know?
Yep. Yeah.
It's made after the fact, you know.
Yeah. Over the years. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's made by a witness describing to a composite artist that has to draw the composite that never seen the suspect. So you're not going to get a perfect likeness, but it was a close enough likeness that I knew. And my thinking was, well, I could make a better composite. So at least now they have their composite. There's nothing more I have to offer. So then I didn't even bother trying to call them back. And, you know, of course, you know, what they say about hindsight being 20/20, if I had to do it over again, I would have called him back, and I would have insisted on speaking to some other detective other than the one I talked to when I first went there. Yeah. He was so nasty and condescending.
Yeah.
And maybe I could have made a little headway, but I didn't, you know, I just let it go. And it was like, but I was, like I said, I was working for a newspaper. So I was reading and keeping up on the case. And I kept reading about how they were going after James Campbell. And my thinking was, well, if they ever charge this guy, I would come to his aid because I know he didn't have anything to do with it, because
Yeah.
it was the guy that I encountered. They say, Kelly, they say there's no coincidences in murder. Okay.
Yep.
So how could it be anyone else other than the guy that I had that bizarre encounter, so bizarre that I followed him to the toy department?
Right.
How can it be anybody else that was there on the same day, the same time, the same location Adam was abducted from, other than that strange person I saw walking in there?
Right.
I knew it had to be him. I just didn't know his name until 10 years later when he was captured.
When you found out, yes.
I found out, yes. I was at work.
You found out his name was Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right. I went to work that night and we were doing paper check. And I was going through one of the papers and I got to a page, and I couldn't remember what page it was. I just remembered it was in the A section. But then when I wrote my book, I started doing more research, and I went to the Broward County Library looking at archives, and I found that the article that I read that freaked me out. It said it was about this guy up in Milwaukee that had murdered a lot of people in his apartment, and it never said anything about Florida. But when I saw that composite in that article, I knew. I started freaking out. I was talking out loud. I was saying, this is the guy I saw in the mall. And everybody kept asking me, Willis, what are you talking about? And I was telling them, this is the guy that was at the mall the day I went there when Adam was abducted. And that night, I stayed up all night, just kept looking at the composite, reading the article, and later on, another updated story came out that said he was in South Beach. And then I knew this was the guy. So I went to the police the next morning when I got off of work. And keep in mind, this was 10 years later, 1991, almost to the week. So I went to the Hollywood Police Department with the article. And when I went there first, the detective they told me that I need to speak to was on vacation. He would call me back, but it took him 4 months to call me back. In the meantime, I called the library up. We had a library, which was really a storage room because they didn't have computers back then. So they used to keep hard copies of all the newspapers. So I went there and I asked them to look up the composite from the Adam Walsh case. Now, back then, if you wanted to look something up, you had to have a pretty good date, because they had files and files with cabinets of all the newspapers. And, they had to know where to start looking, because nothing was computer. It was hand searches.
Yeah.
But I had a date, July 27th, 1981. I remember the date.
Yep.
So it was easy. And since I worked for the Herald, I was a supervisor. I had a mailbox in the press room office. And so they said that they wouldn't charge me since I was an employee, and that as long as I use the in-house mailbox, they'll send it to me, which they did. So when Hoffman finally called me back, I went back to the Hollywood Police Department with the composite and that article from the paper that I kept, and I showed it to him. He was the lead detective that was on the case back in 1981.
Yep.
And I showed him the composite, and his jaw dropped. And I knew he knew something, but he wasn't telling me, and I didn't know what. I wouldn't even know until like years later when they closed the case, and I got a hold of the case files, and I started looking through them, and I realized that composite I had wasn't from the Hollywood Mall. That was the one from the Twin City Mall that Hoffman completely dismissed.
Okay.
It's a spitting image of Jeffrey Dahmer, as well as the Hollywood Mall. So that's what he knew. That I didn't realize. And he went into full cover-up mode. I believe it was at that moment when I went in there and showed him that composite. He didn't want anybody to know how much of a bumbling, stumbling idiot detective he was, as John Walsh said, because he was the one that was dismissing everything and zeroed in on James Campbell.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
So, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I believe, because, they say a lot of the evidence from Otis Toole disappeared because it was in the possession of Hollywood Police Department in their storage room. And everything disappeared, the carpet that they kept from his vehicle and all. And I believe they claim it was lost, and I believe lost is another word for expunged. I believe Hoffman is the
Got rid
one
of it.
that got rid of all the evidence.
Yeah. To protect his own narrative.
Right, Kelly.
What? Yeah.
There's an old saying: when you mess up, never fess up.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's what they're doing. They don't want anybody to know. Milwaukee does the same thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There was a murder right in the same building where Dahmer was. If you look at Dahmer's 17 murders that they put on him,
Yep.
Dean Vaughn is not in that.
How did that person die? Or
okay, he was in apartment 308.
okay.
Dahmer was in 213
Okay.
on the second floor. So
Yep.
Dean Vaughn lived on the third floor. Now, Dean Vaughn was found in his apartment dead.
Yep.
Now, they claimed he was drugged, strangled, and sodomized. He was found on his bed, face down, with his pants down to his ankles.
That's exactly what Dahmer did to his victims. He would drug them, strangle them. Yeah.
Keep in mind, this was 4 months before he was captured. This was an open homicide at the time he was captured.
Is it still unsolved? Is it unsolved?
Oh yeah. Go
to the
Milwaukee cold case.
I will do that. Yeah.
Yes, do that. You'll see Dean Vaughn in there. And you know what else you'll see? The Milwaukee Police Department has a statement in there. If anyone knows anything about this case, please call this number.
Oh, wow. Well,
like they're trying to solve it. Right?
I think that's crazy that they didn't immediately go to Jeffrey Dahmer, who lived in the same building. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They went to everybody in that building. There's 39 apartments in that building, the Oxford building.
Yeah.
There was 39 units. They went to every unit because they knew it had to be somebody, whoever murdered Dean Vaughn had to be somebody within the 39 units of the Oxford building because it had a locked door. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it had an intercom system. Okay. If you lived there, you had to use your key to get in. If you were visiting, you had to use the intercom system to get buzzed in.
Okay.
So they knew it most likely wasn't somebody outside.
Right.
So they did interview everybody within that building.
And
when they went to Dahmer's apartment, when they went to his apartment, they interviewed him. He claimed he didn't know Dean Vaughn. He didn't even know the guy. And they said, well, can we look around your apartment? He said, you can look all you want. But they never went into his bedroom. Had they gone into the bedroom, they would have found 2 dead bodies, one in the bathtub and one on his bed. But
wow.
They never went into his bedroom. And like I said, it was an open homicide. Well, anyway, I started.
Did they collect any DNA at the scene of Dean Vaughn's murder?
That's the whole thing.
Okay.
That's the whole thing. Okay, keep in mind, this is 1991. They could have collected DNA. And I'm sure they do have some, but they don't want to solve the case. Because, and I'll get into that. But anyway, I started calling some of the people that lived in that building. And the woman that lived across the hall from Dahmer claimed she told the police that she saw Dahmer going with Dean Vaughn to his apartment that very night he was murdered.
Wow. So that's good witness testimony.
That should have been a red flag right there, you know?
Yeah.
But like I said, they don't want any red flags when they don't want them.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is when Dahmer was captured, just weeks before he was captured again. Okay, he was captured because Tracy Edwards escaped from his apartment. That's how he ended up getting captured. One victim managed to escape.
Okay.
And flagged down the police. But weeks before that, there was another kid that escaped. He was a 13-year-old child.
Wow.
Low Asian kid that escaped. He was wandering out in the street, butt naked.
Oh.
And the reason he escaped is because Dahmer was trying to make a zombie out of him. That was one of his experiments that he was doing. He was drilling holes in people's skull and injecting watered down muriatic acid into their brain.
Yes.
Right. And so that's what he did with this kid. And he thought his zombie experiment was working so well that he went to get some beers at a local bar on State Street, I believe it was. And while he was there at the bar, his so-called zombie escaped. And he was wandering butt naked out in the street. And these 2 young black girls found him. And they called the police, 911. One girl was 17 years old, one was 18. And so when the police arrived, there's all this commotion on the street. And Dahmer shows up. coming back from the bar. And he goes up to the cops and he says, "Oh, that's my 19-year-old lover." And the police said, "What's his name?" And Dahmer goes, his name is John." It goes like that. His actual name is Conaraxin Basinphone, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways,
Okay.
the two young girls, they're going, "He's not 19. Look at him. He's just a child." And the police told the two girls, they said, "Take off, or we're going to take you downtown," which means jail. And the girls were insistent. The police were very close to arresting them before they finally had to take off. They chased them away. And they gave the kid back to Dahmer.
Oh my gosh.
Dahmer immediately murdered him and boiled his skull and made a trophy out of it. Right. So keep in mind, when Dahmer was finally captured several months later, that the police were so afraid because of minority groups, because most of his victims were from those gay bars, were Black. And the Asian group, because the kid was Asian, you know, and as well as the gay groups were out in large numbers. They were so afraid there was going to be a riot. That's why they went into cover-up mode. They didn't want to connect Dean Vaughn or anything else to Dahmer. Okay, including Adam Walsh, by the way.
Yeah.
Their claim of not wanting to connect Adam Walsh is because they didn't want to interfere with his trial that was going on in Milwaukee. They were getting cooperation from Dahmer, quote unquote cooperation, because it wasn't real cooperation. He was lying about everything. And they didn't want to disturb that cooperation. So that's why they were covering up the Adam Walsh case and Dean Vaughn and many things, because they didn't want riots, because they, you know, the Black community felt like they listened to the white guy, Dahmer, over the two Black girls because they were minorities.
Well, I'm sure that had a lot to do. I mean, that is what happened. Yeah.
And that's why they were afraid there would be riots.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? So, yeah. But anyway,
wow.
Yeah, they went into full cover-up mode and they refused to even make the connection to Adam Walsh, even though when he was captured, Jeffrey Dahmer, his father, Lionel, called America's Most Wanted and told John he thinks his son murdered Adam.
Wow.
Because he knew Jeffrey Dahmer was living in Miami. Because when Jeffrey Dahmer was discharged from the Army, they, you know, just like when I was in the Air Force, when you get discharged, you can get a voucher that you take to the airport. And you can trade it in for a ticket to anywhere you want to go in the United States, a one-way ticket. Just a one-way. Anywhere. So Dahmer chose Miami.
Yes, he did. Yep. And I didn't know that before I started researching this case. I just thought, you know, he was in Milwaukee most of his life. That's what I thought. But he really traveled all around.
I'll bet I know why you thought that.
That's kind of what the media has focused on.
When Dahmer was first captured, I was buying the Milwaukee Cannibal, the Milwaukee, every book that came out on Jeffrey Dahmer, I was buying them. And I was so incensed because none of them mentioned Miami. Some of them mentioned one sentence on Germany. He went to Germany, didn't work out. He went back to Ohio.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. He was down here for 6 months.
I mean, plenty of time to have killed a lot of people. And I'm sure there are a lot of victims that are, you know, unaccounted for, like beyond his 17 that we know about. I'm sure there are a lot more than that.
I can give you one more right here in Miami.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Okay. When Jeffrey came to Miami, he worked his way over to Miami Beach. Okay. And then he had I estimated it, about $800 and something back in 1981 dollars, which was, you know, an okay amount. Yeah. But it doesn't last long. You know? Right. So he was renting hotel rooms by the night. He was drinking his money up, and then he ran out. So he started dumpster diving. And he worked his way up to Sunny Isles, Florida, which is north of Miami Beach. And he was dumpster diving behind the strip mall. And around 5 p.m., this manager of the strip mall happened to be taking the garbage out, and he saw this guy eating out of the dumpster. This was a community dumpster for the entire strip mall. keep in mind. It wasn't just his dumpster, but Dahmer was eating out of it, primarily, food from his store
Yeah.
and other restaurants. So he asked this guy, he didn't know who he was, but he asked him, he says, hey, you're hungry, you need something to eat? So he went inside, made him a sandwich, a sub, and he gave it to Dahmer. Several days later, he saw Dahmer eating out of the dumpster again, and he said, hey, listen, man, do you really need a job or something? And he hired Dahmer as a busboy. Now, Kenny, his name is Kenny Halbert. Kenny said that about 10 days after he hired Dahmer, Dahmer was taking the garbage out. It was his job. And he comes back into the restaurant, the sub shop, and says, hey, Kenny, there's a dead man by your dumpster. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I went down and got the police report from the Miami-Dade Records Department. The date on that police report says July 7th. Okay, Adam was abducted on July 27th. Okay.
Yep.
And then you deduct 10 days from July 7th would be June 27th, right? Because Kenny said about 10 days. So we're saying so June 27th to July 27th is exactly 1 month. So Dahmer got the job. He was working at the sub shop exactly a month before Adam was abducted.
Okay.
Now, in that police report, everything in there is what, quote unquote, Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer says, because they keep calling him Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer. He was a witness.
Okay.
So what happened was when he told Kenny there's a dead man by his dumpster, so what does Kenny do? Naturally, he goes out to look.
Yeah.
And he sees there's a dead man there. So he goes back inside, calls the police. Keep in mind, 1981, there's no cell phones. So he goes back inside, he calls the police. The police come. Now, the first thing the police ask Kenny is what? Who found the body?
Yes. Yeah.
They always want to know that. So he says, oh, my busboy. He says, well, get him out here. We need to speak to him. That's how Jeffrey Dahmer got his name all over this police report. And I did a video trailer on that. If you go to my website, frustratedwitness.com, and go to the meter room link, you can watch that video with the police report.
Okay.
This is an old time police report.
Yeah.
It's a standard form that's filled out by hand. Now everything's on their laptop that's in their cars.
Yep.
But anyway, because I contacted the police officer that made that report. He remembered making that report.
Oh, wow.
And he remembered the dead guy, but he didn't remember Dahmer.
I wonder,
flabbergasted to know Dahmer was the guy that was the witness that he interviewed.
I wonder how long that dead body had been sitting there. Was it still warm?
Right. No, it was in full rigor mortis. And this is why the police officer remembered the dead guy. Because I asked him how he remembered. He said because he was covered in ants and he was only 16 inches high.
Okay.
That's an old police joke, by the way. He was in a prone position.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's what he told me. He said he was 16 inches high. I said 16 inches.
Yeah.
Well, he was in a prone position.
Yes. So,
but anyway,
had he been strangled? Do you know? I wonder. No.
Well, they didn't know that. He ended up being a derelict. Okay,
like a homeless person,
right?
Just
So they only do a cursory autopsy, and they, according to the police report, Dahmer claimed he was drinking all the time. He was sleeping in the meter room, and he went by the name Bobby. So all the information came from Dahmer, and so the autopsy report says he died of alcoholism.
Okay.
But also it said that he only had one shoe on. And the other shoe was found because since Dahmer said he was sleeping in the meter room, the police went to look in the meter room. That's where they found the other shoe. So my thinking, since the guy was in full rigor mortis and covered in ants, he wouldn't have been out by that dumpster all day long, however many hours it takes you to go into full rigor mortis, 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is. My thinking was that he was dead in that meter room, murdered in the meter room, and dragged out when Dahmer was taking the garbage. And then he went back in and told his boss, is a dead man by the dumpster.
That would make
And the
sense.
shoe came off in the meter room where they
Dragging
found the
him.
other shoe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I read that about that meter room right away, I knew. I said, that's it. I made a straight beeline for, because I had the address on there, 17040 Collins Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
I made a beeline for that store. And I went to that meter room.
Mm-hmm.
And I took pictures of the meter room, and I sent them to another writer. And he was arguing because he wrote his own book, but we were going round and round about it. It took me a week to convince him that's where Adam was murdered, because I knew that when somebody murders a young kid or anybody, they're going to take them to someplace they're familiar with.
Yes.
And that would have been someplace Dahmer would be familiar with, because like I said, he was there already working there for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have been familiar, and he murdered somebody in that meeting room as well. So he would have been very familiar with that meeting room.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking that that's where he brought Adam. And this guy, other guy, I don't want to mention his name because I don't want to give him any credit for anything.
Yeah.
But he was telling me that, no, that had to be a dumpster feud, and the guy was murdered, but it was a dumpster feud. And I said, no. He was murdered in the meter room,
Mm-hmm.
and Adam, that's where he brought Adam. So anyways, unbeknownst to me, he went and called ABC Primetime, and they flew down here from New York, and they did a TV show.
Oh, wow.
And you can watch that TV show again on my website, frustratedwitness.com, on the meter room link. And so they did a TV show about the meter room, and it was narrated by Chris Cuomo, who is with CNN now, but before CNN, he was with ABC. And he hosted the show ABC Primetime.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so when they came down here with permission from the mall manager,
mm-hmm.
they hired one of the best CSI experts in Florida, if not the US or even the world. She's really that good. They hired her to go into that meter room, and they pulled all the junk out of there that was in there. And then she found this blood spatter on the back wall of the meter room.
Oh, wow.
And I have a photo of it in my book. And again, you can go to justiceforadam.com, my other website,
mm-hmm.
and you can see the photos there on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I also have it in some of my video trailers, the meter room video trailer. You can see that in a video. And she describes it as being, because she found it with luminol lighting. Okay. And she described it as being indicative of a high velocity homicidal pattern.
Wow.
And she even described on that show how that pattern was created. Describing that there was a murder down by the floor here
mm-hmm.
with heavy chopping that caused the splatter to go up the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Which tells me that the dead man didn't have any blood on him.
Right.
So somebody died in that meter room. Okay. Somebody died in it. This is a high velocity homicidal pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when they did the show, they showed the Hollywood Police Department that police report.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Detective Mark Smith that was in charge by now, this time, of the Adam Walsh case. And they showed it to him. And he admitted he'd never seen that police report before.
Yeah.
And he said, it's interesting, but it's just a coincidence. Nothing to do with Jeffrey Dahmer. He said, and they edited this part out of the TV show. But he said he believes two pit bulls could have gotten in there and had a fight.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I mean, so blood spatter, high velocity blood spatter.
Are you there? You locked.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that is a place where Jeffrey Dahmer had been sleeping at times. And
they also claim that it didn't fit his MO. Decapitation doesn't fit his MO, right? So anyway, I went to the Miami Beach Police Department because the meter room is actually located in Dade County.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not Miami Beach, the Dade County Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's located in Dade County. And I talked to their lead investigator over there, Chuck McCulley is his name, Detective Chuck McCulley. And I told him about the meter room and the blood spatter.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me that he doesn't believe it has anything to do with Dahmer either, you know. So I said, well, how do you explain that blood spatter was described as being indicative of a homicide, you know? And he said, by Jan Johnson. And he said, Jan Johnson, she's worthless. You hear me? She's worthless. And I said, sir, if she's so worthless, why is she the one that trains your homicide detectives?
Oh boy.
Right?
Yeah. So definitely not worthless.
So
yeah.
He said,
she knew what she was doing.
Yeah. So I said, then he tells me, he said, well, I sent my best detective over there and he said a bird flew into the wall. So I said, well, sir, that doesn't explain how this was described as a homicidal pattern unless the bird was murdered.
Right. Did they take any DNA samples of this blood spatter on the wall?
Oh, yeah, of course.
And but what did they ever find anything or?
You know, well, what happened was it was definitely blood.
Yep.
But
human?
It tested positive as blood.
Okay.
So we have a blood spatter indicative of a homicide, but no DNA because of the time. Remember how much time passed? This was in, you had like 27 years passed, plus you have the humidity down here in Florida. Plus keep in mind, this was on a mortared concrete wall.
Right.
I don't know if you ever know anybody that's worked with concrete mortar, but it's very corrosive.
Yeah.
So, DNA has very little chance of surviving that type of an atmosphere or situation.
Yeah.
But and I even went in there on my own and took some of my own samples and sent them out to different labs.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, okay. No, I spent thousands of dollars, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Because the only way I thought we could get them is, from what I was told, is by doing nuclear mitochondrial DNA testing, which takes like a month and costs like $10,000. So I sent it to Orchard Cellmark in Dallas, Texas, to have them do it. And they couldn't get anything out of it. And so they sent me my samples back, and then I went and got some more samples on top of that. And I sent them to a local place called DNA Labs International here in South Florida.
Yeah.
And they also couldn't get anything. And the reason I did that, because when I sent them to Orchard Cellmark, I put all the correct information. You have to fill out all these forms, I put Adam's name in there and everything. And my thinking was, well, they do a lot of work with police departments. Maybe they just didn't want to find anything. So when I went to the International Cellmark DNA testing in Boca Raton, I filled out erroneous information in the police report. I kept the information that I needed to have relevant, correct.
Yeah.
Like, the time frame and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't put Adam's name down. I just put victim.
Probably a good idea.
I just put victim.
Yeah.
And some things like that. And the location, I made it far away from that. I didn't want them to know exactly what this was for.
What you were doing.
And sure enough, when I went there, I saw all these plaques on the wall in the lobby from police departments all over the country. So, that made me even more leery that, they do a lot of work for police departments, of course.
Yeah.
So, but I believe the doctor when she told me that she couldn't get anything. And of course, they didn't charge me the $10,000 since they couldn't get anything. If they would have gone for full month testing, I would have had to pay that much, but it didn't. So I paid a fraction of that, fortunately.
Wow.
Well, not fortunately. I wish I would have paid the full.
Well,
month.
yeah.
DNA.
Yes, exactly.
But, no, they couldn't
solved
get anything,
it.
which is really sad. But there's more than enough evidence to prove that it was Jeffrey Dahmer. You have so many witnesses and facts, that he was living here, that he was a quote unquote witness to another murder,
Right.
that they will never connect to Dahmer, and like I said, there was multiple lies on that police report from Dahmer, Dahmer, and then even in his when they interviewed him after he was captured, and multiple, they say he was so cooperative, but he wasn't. Everything he said is a lie. They just didn't want to catch him in the lies.
Yeah.
I can give you a couple examples of lies that he said that they don't want to make the connection. When they asked him if he ever owned a gun, he says, no, never. That's pretty clear statement, right? No, never.
Yeah.
What does no, never mean? No, you never owned a gun.
Right.
But yet, in the search, they found that there was a gun purchased from Don Stryker gun shop in Milwaukee with Jeffrey Dahmer's signature on it. It was a Colt 357 Magnum, had a signature on it. So when they showed that to Jeffrey Dahmer, says, "Why did you tell us you never owned a gun?" And they showed him the signature, his signature on that. He says, "Well, because I thought it wasn't relevant to this case."
So he lied.
But you lied.
Yeah.
Regardless of what he thought, he said he didn't own one.
Right.
And other things are like when he was in Germany, you know, he was invited to a Thanksgiving dinner by one of the sergeants, and along with other soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they interviewed him, they asked him if he ever left, because, you know, he was already suspected of multiple murders in Germany. They asked him if he ever left the base, and he says only twice. You know, once to go for training in Landstuhl, and once when he went to Oktoberfest in Munich, I believe it was Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
So he went there, and that's the only 2 times he ever left the base. And then in my own researches, I find out that when he went to Munich, he took a train back to Baumholder, and there was a murder on that train. And he jumped off the train.
Wow.
Yeah. And I believe he jumped off the train because somebody pulled the rope that stops the train and jumped off, the person that murdered that woman on the train. And what we do know is when Dahmer did arrive back in Germany late, he said that he got off at the wrong stop. Yeah, I think you're pulling a rope to stop the train and jumping off is the wrong stop. Right?
Those are a lot of crazy coincidences, and
back to the
probably aren't. Yeah.
And also back to the Thanksgiving. This is another time that he claimed that he didn't leave the base, and then Carlos Cruz calls the Milwaukee Police Department and tells him about the time he went to invited Dahmer at his house for Thanksgiving, and Dahmer had left. After they ate, Dahmer left because they had an argument over the sleeping arrangements, and he was gone for 4 hours. When he came back, he had blood all over him. He was completely disheveled, and he came in, and when he first left, you know, they didn't think a whole lot of it, but when he returned 4 hours later, they said his jacket was warm to the touch, even though it was like sub-zero weather, because they told everybody to stay over for the night because a blizzard started coming in, and worked the way back to the base in the morning. When Dahmer came back 4 hours later, back to Carlos Cruz's house, he had blood on him, and he went into the kitchen. He washed himself off real good, and he was just sitting at the dining table and just staring into space, according to Carlos Cruz. And Carlos asked him, "What's going on? What happened?" And Dahmer said, "I think I did something bad, but I can't talk about it." And to find out that there were 2 women murdered on that base.
Wow.
So, I mean, and nobody ever wants to talk about these things, you know? Like I said, in Miami, that derelict, you'll never hear about that derelict.
No.
You know, that was, I believe, murdered by Dahmer.
Yeah. Well, this has been very eye-opening. I did not know these connections with Germany and Florida and all of this. So this is great. I've learned a lot more about potential Jeffrey Dahmer victims. So yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with him, or?
I think we're okay for now. But,
okay. Yeah.
I would just like to say, if anybody would like to go to my website,
yes,
frustratedwitness.com, and you can get much more information. It's all free.
Yep.
So you can watch video trailers, you can read reports, you can listen to radio shows I've done with other witnesses as well.
I was going to ask that. Have you spoken with other witnesses from the mall?
I've contacted most all the witnesses.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The ones that would talk. There's a couple that didn't want to talk, but most of the ones that wanted to talk, I've talked to them, and I've done radio shows with many of them.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
Yeah. So you can go and listen to these shows. Terry Keaton, the 10-year-old from the Riviera Beach. Now you can listen to his statements. I did with his mother as well. That incident, keep in mind, mirrors the Adam Walsh case. Okay, not just the person they saw, but the entire incident.
Yes.
The only difference is Reve Walsh went to the Hollywood Mall with her son to shop for a lamp, right?
Yes.
Ginger Keaton went to the Riviera Sears to shop for a dress. That's the only difference. Both of them left their sons in the toy department where they went shopping. Both of them had somebody try to abduct them with a blue van.
Wow.
White male, 6 feet.
Obviously, that was the same person.
In both cases swears, before I even contacted them, they knew it was Jeffrey Dahmer. You know,
that's
Terry Keaton
crazy.
swears it was Jeffrey Dahmer. Ginger told me too. She says they were in the living room watching TV. This is before I ever contacted them. When Dahmer made news and Terry jumps out of his chair and says, "Mom, that's the guy. That's the guy."
Wow. Wow. Yeah. He remembered. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah. Once they see the person again, they're like, that is the person. Yeah.
But again, they say it doesn't fit his MO, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it does. He decapitated other bodies. He cut all the bodies apart. Like, that's totally part of his MO. So yeah.
And another thing is that, you know, I found the axe. I still have it. The axe that was next to that blood spatter.
Really?
Which could be the murder weapon.
Oh.
Because remember, that blood spatter is going way up the wall.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So because his head was not sliced off, it wouldn't cause spatter. It was chopped.
Yes. Yeah.
So that, you know, that's another thing that, you know, dismisses artist tool, you know. I mean, but there's so much that dismisses. He was never even in Florida.
Yeah.
South Florida, I should say.
Yeah. There's so much, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. But thank you for explaining this stuff to me. And everybody go to frustratedwitness.com. Willis Morgan has a lot to say about this subject, and he's done a lot of years of research. So check out his book. It's on Amazon, all of that. So it's been great talking to you. And I'm sure we'll talk again at some point about more of this. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, and you're very welcome. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, and I'll stop recording now, but the rest from here on, I'll take this out. But thank you for coming, though. Thank you for talking to me. That's just crazy. All of that. That's just crazy.
Right. This is the only case where a serial killer, never mind a notorious one, gets a police department to be the best advocate.
I know. Usually they want to blame more deaths on the serial killer or something. This time they're like, no.
How do you get? I mean, I joke about it and say, if you want to commit a murder, come down to Hollywood.
Yeah, Florida in general. Florida has so many murders.
Don't believe that. Jeffrey Dahmer is an exception. Believe me.
Yeah.
Don't think they're going to give you the same treatment. Come to your aid.
No, I don't plan on killing anyone anyway.
No, so. I don't either. I'm just saying. I joke about it because how could they give him, so much protection?
I know.
My thinking is because they know he's not going anywhere anyway.
Yeah.
It has to be the only reason. The only thing I want to believe. I don't want to believe a police is really, police department is really that.
Yep. They figured
really want to aid some serial killer.
Figured that he's in prison for life, but yeah. So you're 74, 70.
I am
74. Okay. All right. What do you do for fun in Florida? You're retired.
I am retired. This is what I do for fun.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's
seriously,
great.
I describe myself as an old retired guy with a tenacity problem.
Oh, well, I think that's great.
Do you know, Kelly, I actually went because the Hollywood Police Department, they refused to talk to me. But what I did was I started writing to other people, like even the governor of Florida.
Yeah.
The medical examiner's office, the Department of Law Enforcement, Sheriff's Office, and City Hall, complaints department, filing complaints against the Hollywood Police Department. And after doing all of this, because I kept requesting an interview and they refused to give it to me. So finally I get a call from one of the detectives saying, the phone rings, I answer and he says, okay, we're going to give you that interview. It was like that.
Wow.
And it only happened because all these other places kept calling them saying, hey, this guy keeps calling us, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to give you an example, I went to the city hall, okay,
Mm-hmm.
in Hollywood. And I talked to this woman, her name is Cheryl Hound. She was in charge of the complaints department.
Mm-hmm.
And I left her with a portfolio of information. I talked to her for like 40 minutes at least. And she told me, said, Willis, you got to come in next Tuesday to the meeting. You know, all the commissioners will be there and the mayor. I said, you got to be there and tell them this story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, well, I'll be more than glad to do it. I said, in the meantime, can I leave you with this portfolio? You know, you can show it to them. And so she said, sure, of course. But she never called me back. So when I finally called her back after about 10 days, and I called her back after about 10, Anyways, after about 10 days, I call her back and she goes, I asked her, I said, what happened to that meeting that we were supposed to have? And she goes, well, sir, if you have issues with the Hollywood Police Department, you need to go to them and air out your problems. So I knew somebody put her in check.
Somebody definitely had to talk to her. Yeah. Had a chat with her. Yes.
And this is what was happening with everywhere I went. So I asked her, I said, well, can I get my portfolio back? And she said, well, if you want your portfolio, you need to go to the Hollywood Police Department. I said, you gave it to them?
Oh,
I had a lot of bad things to say about them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it was after that. Oh, no, it wasn't even after that. It was after one of the detectives at the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
I called her and she set up an appointment for me. I was supposed to come in. And again, she never called me back. You know, I had the appointment. I called, you know, I was supposed to come in, but she calls me back. In fact, I was ready to leave the house is what happened. And she called me and told me the appointment's been canceled. Or, you know, I said, canceled or postponed? And she goes, well, postponed. It's postponed for when? Next week? So we'll get back to you. She was very nervous and all. And she never called me back. You know, somebody put her in check too. Don't just get rid of them, you know. But then it was right after that call that I got my phone rang, and it was this detective from the Hollywood Police Department. Says, okay, we're going to give you that interview now. You know?
Yeah.
So I went in there. I met the police chief. Chad Wagner was the police chief at the time, and these two goons that were supposed to do the interview. And I even asked Chad, I said, I told him, I said, I hope this is going to be an amicable interview.
Yeah.
And he goes, in a very condescending tone to me. I mean, very condescending, like he's talking to a 5-year-old. He goes, well, these two nice detectives are going to listen to everything you have to say and take notes.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
So in that interview, these two detectives, they were acting more like deceased Dahmer's attorneys than they were, you know, homicide detectives. Yeah, they did everything they could to stick up for Dahmer. You know?
Oh,
yeah.
That's bad. Yeah.
But anyways, in short, finally, one of the detectives, his name is Detective Lyle Bean. He jumps out of his chair because he's sitting opposite of me. And he starts flailing his arms about. And he goes, you just admitted you were there. For all I know, you could have done it. How'd you like it if I arrest you?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he backs up a couple steps, folds his arm. I don't know if you can see it, you know, like a tough guy, you know?
Yeah.
And he has a smirk on his face, backs up a couple steps and goes, so you think you want to come back here again?
Oh, well, that's
like, you know, a threat of arrest.
That's threatening. Yeah. And all you're doing is trying to help solve this case. Yeah.
Needless to say, everything they said is in my book.
Good. That's good. Yeah.
But anyways, and
hold them accountable
at one point, because at one point I could see when they weren't believing anything I said because they didn't want to believe anything.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, well, listen, I'm willing to take a polygraph. And Bean again tells me, well, polygraphs don't mean anything. They just mean you think what you saw. You think you saw what you think you saw. You know?
Yeah.
So when I left, after I finally just about got kicked off, they escorted me out the front door. So when I left, I went and tried to get my own polygraph, self-sponsored,
Yeah.
pay for it myself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I called a polygraph examiner in Hollywood here, had a pretty good name. And they told me they couldn't give it to me because they do a lot of work with the Hollywood Police Department. It would be a conflict of interest.
Oh,
So I had to go
okay.
like over 50 miles away to get a polygraph exam. And I, by the way, have that copy of that exam along with the examiner's opinion
Yeah.
in my book.
Oh,
Because
great.
he didn't have much.
Your book just sounds so interesting. It's chock full of information that we have not seen or heard anywhere else. So I cannot wait to read it. I'm really excited.
Oh, I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
It really is. I put a lot of work into this, as you can see. I've been working on it for decades. So
Oh, yeah.
it's not something you just sit down, like all these books when Dahmer was first captured. That's the problem with those books. First of all, they're not written by firsthand or witnesses or anything.
Right.
They're just written by somebody trying to get a quick buck.
Yep.
So everybody's trying to get their book published while everything's fresh in the news, because that's when you sell books, So within weeks after his capture, you have all these books coming out. And none of them get any information right, And I like I said, I've contacted all the witnesses because the Hollywood Police Department is so inept and so incompetent that they didn't redact hardly anything from their case file.
Oh,
You look at the FBI case files, everything is redacted. There were numerous witnesses calling the FBI about Jeffrey Dahmer after he was captured.
Yep.
But I don't know who they were because they were all redacted. If the Hollywood Police Department would have redacted the names of all these witnesses, I would have never been able to track them down.
Right. They just left it all out there. Yeah.
Right.
For you. Good for you. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. All right. Well, Willis Morgan, author of Frustrated Witness, thank you for coming on and talking to me. And I am going to be reading your book as soon as I can get my hands on it. And I urge everyone else to do the same.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
My first book came out in 2015.
Yes.
Okay. The hardcover book on the cover says it's a meter room where I believe Adam was murdered. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a picture of that meter room. That's the cover. And I put a crime scene tape across the meter room. And it says crime scene, do not cross.
Yeah.
But my attorney told me, my copyright attorney, she told me that every time she looks at that cover, she thinks it should say crime scene, do not investigate.
Yeah, that's poignant.
So if you look at the second edition of Frustrated Witness, again, that's the one to get because it's more updated.
Yes.
Okay.
Second edition. Yep.
Yes, the second edition. It's more updated. And I changed the crime scene tape to crime scene, do not investigate.
Because
across that meter room, because they don't want to investigate.
Because they didn't do their due diligence.
They know that wasn't two pit bulls.
Yeah.
The Dade County knows it wasn't a bird.
No, I know.
I mean, if you're going to come up with something, don't make it so ludicrous.
Right, right.
I mean, that's insane.
That's a much more fitting
Right.
photo
if
to
anybody
have on
buys
there.
the book, second edition, make sure.
Second edition of Frustrated Witness.
Frustrated Witness.
Yep. Okay. Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Willis. It'll take me a little bit. This will go on YouTube, and it will also, I will do a podcast audio version, but it'll take me a little while to get it all edited. So, but I will be sure to send you all the links to everything.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're
welcome.
You so much.
I want to put all that on my Facebook page too.
Oh, awesome. Yes, please do. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. So I'll keep in touch with you. Once I get everything done and ready, I will send it all to you. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay. It's been nice chatting with you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Willis. Bye-bye. Bye.